Let me I got a lot to say in this video. First of all, shout out to Ticket TV for shouting my channel out, supporting my channel. I really appreciate it, brother. And shout out to LB, another team member, man, of LDBC. And shout out to Ticket TV for his video on this, talking about how Chris Broussard is out of line for disrespecting Ben Wallace. Before I get to that, I want to address something that Chris Broussard and Shannon Sharp was saying about Paul George for a second. And they were saying that he's not a Hall of Famer. Look, I've been very critical of Paul George. I've made videos saying that he has a loser's mentality. Okay, I've made videos saying that there's something mentally wrong with Paul George at times. Okay, when I said loser's mentality, I'm talking about a guy who I'm looking at as one of the top players in the NBA, and he was doing this a lot last couple of years. And you're excusing, instead of saying, "Look, I got to go out there and do better." You know what I'm saying? Uh, no, he would blame officiating. He would blame not getting calls. Not being used right in the offense. Look, you might be thinking that, but a great player doesn't say shit like that. And yeah, there are times when he would come out and not have the type of game that you think Paul George should have. And you think he's thinking, he's overthinking, and sometimes pressure might get to Paul George. But you can't say that pressure got to Paul George yesterday. That was an elimination game. Paul George had the best playoff game of his career. And I'm looking at the media's reaction to it. Some of the people are praising him, but some of them are kind of like trying to throw salt on it. Just like after his historic performance for him, they're questioning whether he's a Hall of Famer. And this is what my issue is. Shannon Sharp said, well, I mean, people saying he's a Hall of Famer, Skip, but he, Tracy McGrady, he don't have a Finals MVP. He doesn't win a championship. He never have an All-Star Game MVP, Skip. By the way, doesn't Shannon sometimes sound like Joanna Man and shit? But anyway, okay. But you know what? You know who else falls into that criteria? Adrian Dantley, Alex English, George Gervin, uh, who else? I believe Pete Maravich. I don't think Pete Maravich has ever won an All-Star Game MVP. He might have. I might be missing a performance. But there's a lot of players who are in the Hall of Fame who've never been to an NBA Finals and never won an All-Star Game MVP. I don't believe Dominique Wilkins won an All-Star Game MVP. I don't believe Reggie Miller has ever won an All-Star Game MVP. Mitch Richmond did. Uh, Glenn Rice did. But does that make them better than, say, a guy like Sweet Lou Hudson, who's a superior basketball player but still not in the Hall of Fame? You guys got to really understand. You guys really have to look at these players and see what they accomplished before you make stupid statements. Because there have been a plethora of players who have not been fortunate to play on good teams. And increasingly, all-star selections are based upon popularity or who's being promoted by the media. For instance, 99.9% of fans have no fucking idea that this past season, De'Aaron Fox averaged over 25 points and 7 assists. No, they don't know that. Why? Because the media don't talk about it. But you did know back in 1994 what every star was doing in the league because they did a better job of talking about all these players. But let me get to one more point about Paul George before I get to him dissing Ben Wallace. I heard of somebody say, I think it was Chris Broussard, say I can name 10 small forwards better than Paul George. Okay, that still doesn't mean he's not a Hall of Famer. Because look, even if I go back to the '96 top 50 team, right? If you go back to the '96 top 50 team, one thing that you will notice is the plethora of small forwards, on the list. Paul Arizin, Rick Barry, Elgin Baylor, Larry Bird, Billy Cunningham. Even though you could call him a four, but he played the three. Right there, that's already 5 small forwards. Julius Erving, that's 6. I'm gonna consider Gervin a shooting guard, so I'm not gonna count him. Havlicek, that's 7. Let's see. Scottie Pippen, that's 8. And James Worthy is 9. So 9 of the top 50 back then were small forwards. So you're not including guys later on like LeBron James and Kevin Durant and others. So there have been a lot of small forwards over the years in the NBA. A lot of great small forwards. And this list is, and remember, people critique this list because they said, well, where is because there's been so many great small forwards, they didn't want to have too many. But they were like, well, where is Dominique Wilkins on this list? Where is Alex English on this list? Where is Adrian Dantley on this list? For that matter, where's Chris Mullin? All these guys have one thing in common. They're small forwards. So what I'm saying is, when you talk about the small forward position, that is the most deep, talent-rich position in the history of the NBA. So you sitting up there saying, well, I can name 10 small forwards better than Paul George. That don't mean shit. He's still going to be a Hall of Famer. What are you talking about? Grant Hill's in the Hall of Fame. He was a small forward. He only got to play 6 prime years. I think he should be in the Hall because of those 6 years plus his collegiate career. But come on. Let's be real. And another thing you said, Chris Broussard, that pissed me the hell off, and I'm going to do a video about this shit. It may not be today, but I'm going to do a video. Don't you ever in your fucking life disrespect DJ Dennis Johnson like that, saying that he won't special. Let me tell your ass something, motherfucker. By the time he got to Boston, he wasn't even in his prime any fucking more. He was already 30 years old, over 30 if I'm not mistaken, about 30 years old when he got to Boston. His best years were when he was playing with the Seattle Sonics and the Phoenix Suns in the 70s and very, very early 80s, when he was putting up 20-something points a game. He changed his game to fit with the Celtics. And the reason why Boston got DJ is because they needed an answer to Andrew Toney, because Andrew Toney was nicknamed the Boston Strangler because of how much he used to kill Larry Bird and that team. Nigga, don't you fuck with me. Now, going on to Ben Wallace. First of all, anybody that watched Ben Wallace play with the Detroit Pistons knows good and goddamn well that he's a Hall of Famer. Now, first of all, he didn't get in first ballot because he retired 2013, I believe. This is 2021. So the Hall of Fame felt like, well, I don't know if he's first ballot, but he's a Hall of Famer. They gave Dennis Rodman the same treatment. So they see Ben Wallace as, I guess, not on the level of Michael and Kobe and those guys, but he's definitely a Hall of Famer. I have no problem with him being a Hall of Fame because I watched this man play. Was he a complete basketball player? No. But then again, how many fucking players are playing today that you motherfuckers are telling me a Hall of Famer? People like to say that he didn't score, but what exactly is Draymond Green's qualifications? Y'all like to say that Dennis Rodman and Ben Wallace didn't score, but how many fucking points is Draymond averaging? 8? Where's the offense? What's the difference between 7 and 8 points? And Draymond is actually shooting the fucking ball. Draymond's resume, with the exception of those titles, you take those titles away. Really, even if you add the titles, it still pales in comparison to what Ben Wallace was able to do. Ben Wallace has a distinction of being the only undrafted player in the Hall of Fame. But he'll formally be inducted a couple of months from now, but you know what I'm saying. Ben Wallace had a 6-year run from 2000 to 2006, where he averaged 7.9 points, 12.9 rebounds, 1.7 assists, 1.6 steals, and 2.8 blocks. And he only averaged 1 turnover a game. And he led the league in defensive win shares 4 years in a row. And he won 4 Defensive Player of the Year awards. And it really should have been 5. He should have won an unprecedented 5. The one year that he didn't win it, the Pistons won the championship. He should have won it that year too. He is one of the most dominant defensive forces the NBA has ever seen. Okay, when I think of guys that were defensive shutdown guys, yes, you got to think of Bill Russell. But when I think of guys who could change the game defensively, I think of Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, because Wilt doesn't get his due as how much he altered games defensively. I think of prime Mark Eaton before he got older. I think of, to a slightly lesser extent, Alonzo Mourning. I think of Akeem Olajuwon, David Robinson in his prime, Mount Mutombo, Ben Wallace. These are the generally accepted greatest defensive players at the center position that we've ever seen. Then, of course, you got Dennis Rodman. They're the best. And the way that the game was played before, when they weren't trying to shun bigs and try to make you think they're these big unathletic goons and all this dumb shit that they're putting out there now. I don't know what the fuck they got against the big man now. You see it in the NBA. They tell you that DeMarcus Cousins ain't shit. They tell you that Giannis Antetokounmpo, even though he's averaging 30 points a game, oh, it's just all size. And you motherfuckers are falling for this bullshit. You're falling for this garbage. Then I seen somebody at Tickets Chat say, well, Ben Wallace will be too slow. Nigga, are you smoking crack? So, okay, Nikola Jokic, who damn sure you wouldn't mistake as Usain Bolt, he can make it today. Slow as fuck, but Larry Bird can't. Larry Bird couldn't, oh no, Larry couldn't make it today. Larry couldn't make it today. Tyler Hero, he can be in the NBA, but Rick Barry can't. I don't understand you motherfuckers, man. Do y'all look at footage? This is what I think it is with some of you motherfuckers. Some of you motherfuckers will look at old footage where things are slowed down and the footage moves slow. I think you guys really believe they move that slow in the footage. That footage is slowed down for a reason. People weren't walking and running in slow motion back then. They were running in. I'm gonna tell you motherfuckers to do something. Go on YouTube. I want you to go on YouTube and I want you to look up NBA old timers game. Old timers. They did away with it in 1993, I think, because too many of the older guys were getting hurt, and they were kind of afraid they were gonna get sued and all this type of shit. But I want you to look up an old timers game. I think it was from 1990 or 89, right? And I want you to see how these motherfuckers was playing when they were in their late 40s and 50s, and compare it to how some of these young, great old-time athletes are playing today. Look at the effort these motherfuckers are playing. Look at the basketball IQ out there. Look how hard they're playing. They weren't even getting paid for playing. Go look at 58-year-old Bill Sharman. Go look at John Havlicek when he was almost 50. Look at all these guys in these old-timers games playing. Look at Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf now in the Big Three dominating at times. Stop listening to these dumb motherfuckers, man. Stop listening to these people on YouTube that have agendas. The only agenda that I have is truth. I'm not knocking today's players. If I'm knocking today's players, I'll be shitting on Paul George. And I'm gonna tell you something else. Shout out to Steph Curry's the GOAT, because he made a hell of a point. People like to shit on Paul George, right? But Paul George has had more memorable playoff performances than James Harden ever had. But nobody will question James Harden being in the Hall of Fame, will it? Why? Because he's putting up all these points. I can't think of any memorable James Harden playoff performance. Was James Harden ever an All-Star Game MVP, Shannon Sharp? Was James Harden ever a Finals MVP? Was he ever an NBA champion? No. But would you question him being in the Hall of Fame? Ben Wallace changed the culture of the Detroit Pistons. He changed the culture of that team. Rip Hamilton, Tayshaun Prince, Rasheed Wallace. Now, Rasheed Wallace was a borderline all-star, but they weren't noted for their defensive prowess. Ben Wallace changed the culture of that team, and they became a force with with the Detroit Pistons. And Ben was their unofficial leader. Yeah, Chauncey Billups was the floor leader, but Ben Wallace was their unofficial. Like, he was the guy that changed everything with that team. When you took Ben Wallace off that team, that's when the Pistons started falling apart. And people forget one year they won 64 games. And if you put Ben Wallace in today's game, 6'9", 245 pounds of muscle. This guy was muscle, and he was fat, and he was fast in his prime. He could run the floor. This ain't no slow, plodding Todd McCullough motherfucker. If you think Bam Adebayo can play in today's game and Ben Wallace couldn't, you're out of your goddamn mind. But if you put Ben Wallace in today's NBA with the faster pace, where teams are averaging over 110 points a game, 115 points a game, more possessions, more rebounds, versus when he was playing with the Pistons, when it was a half-court, bogged down game, averaging only 80 or so points a game, 90. Ben Wallace would probably be averaging, I'd say on top of my head, at least 19 boards a game, maybe 20. You see, remember how the numbers were inflated in the 60s when Wilt and Russell was averaging 20, 25, almost 30 rebounds a game? That same effect would happen today because everything is inflated because of the pace. But Ben Wallace, look, if Andre Drummond could average 14, 15 rebounds a game, with the force and hustle that Ben Wallace had, Ben Wallace is a country nigga, a top strong country nigga that could bench 465 in his prime. This nigga could out bench press Shaq. Shaq was bench pressing 450. This nigga is cock diesel strong. Them niggas like Ben Wallace and Karl Malone and Wilt Chamberlain and Artis Gilmore, those are some cock strong fucking inhuman type strength motherfuckers. Y'all just don't get it. Did y'all ever see that footage of the Malice at the Palace when Ben Wallace pushed Meta World Peace? And Meta World Peace was a chiseled motherfucker. This nigga was strong as a motherfucker. This nigga was strong. Ben Wallace pushed that motherfucker and he didn't want no parts of Ben Wallace. I think Ben's mother had just died, if I'm not mistaken. His mother or his father. He didn't want no parts of that shit. If Ben was averaging 12, 13 rebounds then, there's no doubt that I know he'd be averaging 19 or 20 today. Dennis Rodman probably be averaging 22. They were athletes, so their numbers would be inflated. I know that much. The shot blocks would be lower because guys aren't taking it to the basket as much. So I'm not saying the blocks would be higher, but the rebounds, much higher. Much higher. And he would still be a force. And people will be marveling at his rebounding ability. And people would be marveling at how much he stuffed the stat sheet because he would get, 10 points, 23 rebounds, 5 steals, uh, 2 assists. He'd be getting all these great numbers. People like, oh man, this nigga Ben Wallace, this nigga do it all. He does it all. What you think, Ken Pritchard? Man, Ben Wallace, he does it all out there on the court. He give you points. He give you rebounds. He give you assists. He give you block steals. I mean, he sometimes be going coast to coast like a guard. This guy's one of the greatest forces I've ever seen. I can envision the bullshit that come out their mouths. It'd be true, but these motherfuckers is full of bullshit. So all I'm saying is Ben Wallace is a Hall of Famer, certified. Paul George most likely will go into the Hall of Fame. Tracy McGrady should have been in the Hall of Fame. Okay? People like to sit there and say Tracy McGrady is not a Hall of Famer. Well, I tell you what, Tracy McGrady dominated the NBA from 2000 to 2009. Last I checked, if you dominate a league for a decade period, you should be in the Hall of Fame. Did he have individual success? No. But I also will tell people, look at that Orlando Magic roster when Tracy McGrady was winning those scoring titles and see if any other player, I don't give a fuck if you put Kobe over there. Kobe's not going to make Gordon Gierzek and Drew Gooden into champions. Okay? As bad as that 2006 roster was, that 2000, I think, 2 roster with the Orlando Magic was even more garbage. Now, you could say with Houston, maybe they should have got the first round. I give you that. They should have at least gotten out of the first round. But let's not act like the Western Conference wasn't full of killers back then either. Don't act like the Western Conference, you still didn't have to contend with Weber's Kings. You still didn't have to contend with Dirk's emerging Dallas Maverick squad. Let's not act like later on you didn't have to deal with the Suns and Steve Nash. Let's act like you didn't have to deal with Kobe and Shaq's Lakers, and later on Kobe's and Gasol's Lakers. Let's act like you didn't have to deal with the Portland Trail Blazers and their different iterations. Whether you're talking about the Jailblazers or the team that had LaMarcus Aldridge and Brandon Roy. Don't act like you didn't have to deal with the Utah Jazz. Let's not act like you didn't have to deal with all these different squads. Come on now, let's keep it 100. The San Antonio Spurs. So at the end of the day, let's just be fair, let's be real, and peace out.